one question is how to work on getting the breath in heaven and earth to be smooth and longer, especially in the first part of the move when my arms get up sort of the height of the diaphragm and above. Like I'm noticing that if I'm really trying to be rigorous about it, I can't even do the breath pattern that's in, out, because stuff starts to really grab like right around here. So I was wondering if you had any like practice suggestions on how to work on that. So the other question was about in doing Tai Chi forms, I guess as an example, but how much intent and or effort to put behind the breath and the breathing in the Tai Chi form. And I guess the question is, given that I have done some yoga in the past, like the prime mover of all the energy in the body is the breathing pattern. So I'm wondering like what an appropriate amount of effort for the breath is in Tai Chi.
Those are pretty related from, and let's back up and just start to make a distinction that if yoga is using the breath as prime mover, some of the Qigong sets will do that. So you'll learn a lot of Qigong sets, and the closest that we come to doing that is in Dragon and Tiger, where the breath has a more prominent role. And you get to play with different speeds of breathing and patterns and types of breath. This is where having the distinction between Neigong and Qigong becomes so useful. So Qigong you can translate as breath work or energy work around that's really tied to breathing. But a lot of the internal work of heaven and earth, energy gates, gods, all those other ones, and then Tai Chi is definitely in that category too. I guess the easiest way to say it is they're not pneumatic, they're hydraulic. So making that distinction between air-powered and fluid-powered is the way to start to parse it, I think. And what that means is when you're doing a breathing practice, if you're thinking about it from a Tai Chi point of view, do your breathing separately. Make the breathing, you do a sitting breathing practice, you do a standing breathing practice, even do other Qigong exercises, treat those all separate. And I would say that the key to what you want to do in your standalone breathing practice is you want to start to loosen up the diaphragm and get all of the internal movement, just of the musculature involved with breathing, working as well as possible, working as smoothly as possible. So like if you're standing and breathing, a couple things about the anatomy make this really obvious. I'm feeling right at the diaphragm, at his lower ribs, and you can spend a lot of time just standing here trying to activate the diaphragm. And what that's going to do is it's going to create all these internal pressures, and we've talked about this a lot before, right? It creates the pressures into the guts. You get a nice efficient breath into the lungs, and if you take it one step further from an anatomy point of view and an alignment point of view, you start to pull on a lot of stuff connected to the spine. So if you do your breathing well, you should really be starting to open up the spine a little bit as well. And they're kind of interrelated in that sense, that the more you learn about spinal alignment and opening up the spine, the easier it becomes to do your breathing, because a lot of these connections into the diaphragm get loosened up. And that's where you start to see the answer to the heaven and earth question really specifically, and the Tai Chi question generally. So when you asked me this question, I've been trying to think about a way to kind of demonstrate it. And if you put your arm out for a second, right? So this is going to be this is a hard thing to externalize and demonstrate visually. But if I start twisting Nate's arm, the twist is going to go into the elbow, into the shoulder, and then what starts to happen here as the twist goes into his body, right? You can see by turning his forearm, I'm tugging on his spine, and I twist more, and it gets more of the spine. Right? It's a complicated way of saying this is all connected. So when you're playing with this really deep breath, one of the things that starts to happen when the diaphragm is moving really clearly is it starts to pull on a lot of stuff moving through the body. And this is, I think, for me, this is the most successful way to deal with breathing in Tai Chi. You're going through the form, and you go through some movement where the more the elbows start to connect to the spine, and the arms connect into the body, the same way that I could twist your forearm and get to the spine, you're going to find ways that the limbs twist, and that twist goes into the guts, and it goes into the body. And so inevitably you start pulling on the diaphragm when you're doing the arm and leg movements. And the thing to think about with this is that because it's not linear movement, this is another beautiful thing that you didn't realize you're asking about, right? Because you're not just doing straight line movement, when you do straight line, you get these kind of jarring tugs on the body. But you're not doing straight lines. And maybe you're not even doing circles. You're doing circles and then spheres. So by definition, when you're doing a circle, the vector, the force vector of how the arm is pulling on the body is constantly changing. Right? So you go through this, and I feel a certain tug on the diaphragm. And it pulls through the middle of my body. And if I roll through this in a smooth enough way, the pull is constantly shifting and changing. And so what happens is internally you feel like you're playing with all these pressures, and one kind of rolls off the next one. And so it almost doesn't even start to matter whether one's an inhale and one's an exhale. And you'll find the inhale-exhale pattern will just kind of go on its own. But you're focused on constantly changing the vector and constantly opening the space inside the body in a new way. So to me, does that kind of make sense? I know it's kind of weird, but think about it in like a stick figure, right? You got the spine in the middle, and you got the arms and legs connected into it. And the more your body becomes connected up, breathing is not an exception to the way that any one piece of tissue is connected to any other piece of tissue in the body. The breathing mechanism, all the stuff that governs breathing, has all these interconnections to everything else. So when you're moving, it's affecting the primary breathing mechanism. And your goal with it is like anything else, that the turns and the twists and the ins and the outs in the form should loosen the diaphragm as well. And loosen up, so the breathing feels looser, feels deeper. It feels like you hit a really good posture, and all of a sudden everything sinks in more. You get more space in there. And so the breathing either comes in more or goes out more in a stronger, deeper way.